Okay, we are.
Oh, okay. Take two. So let's sum up what we all thought of the movie. Does anybody want to go first and what you're going to give the score for?
I guess I'll go first. So I give the movie a 3, which is like right in the middle for us because I really think it does start conversation and really presents a new concept to the media, but it also is really whitewashed. Um, we see examples of this throughout the whole film, especially with Khalil's murder and how they change it from the novel from the hairbrush like sitting in his side door to him picking up the hairbrush and brushing his hair with it. And this like asserts the blame more on him and not the police officer, which is why we think the movie is so whitewashed because it takes away from the whole meaning behind the Black Lives Matter movement or like any person trying to be a activist for these marginalized communities.
Yeah,
Yeah, I definitely, agree with that rating. Before kind of watching or reviewing this film, I would actually have given it kind of a higher rating. I would have kind of thought that it really does start that conversation with 5 or 4 hairbrushes. But now that we've really reviewed the film and kind of read the articles from, this course, I really kind of go to either a 3 or a 2. And that's just being said because it's that the elements in the film are so whitewashed, and it really has me checking my privilege and kind of what else am I whitewashing throughout any type of media.
I completely agree.
yeah. And by whitewashing, they even took the character and made her a lighter skinned black lead that was mixed race instead of um, how the book represented her as.
And that too, Kim, also how you were talking about the coloring of what the film actually did, how like,
Oh, yes.
do you want to kind of talk about that a little bit?
Sure. One of the reviewers that I came across, and I agree, I saw this. The Whenever we were in the school, all the school tone brightened and lightened everybody to make them about the same color. And that's a form of trying to be colorblind even in that space. Whereas outside the space in her home, she had more hue and the colors were warmer and things like that. And more unique. So that was
It's
very
an interesting
interesting.
tactic.
It is an interesting tactic and it definitely like contributes to the idea of colorism and how as as a society hierarchical society we Americans tend to base a person's like the idea of American beauty, white standards of beauty. We tend to see like, okay, this person's lighter, they're more in the proximity of whiteness, so they have the privileges of closer to a whiter person than someone that's more darker skinned. And I think that really contributes to the conversation when we analyze it this deeply. I don't think if we were just watching this movie in theaters like without even thinking about this class or like any cultural context, I don't know if we would recognize that because we are
Yeah,
women
I
and yeah.
right. I also think though, like when looking at the film too, it's the film is kind of portrayed and based for the white audience.
Hmm.
It's
Yes.
not necessarily for, people of color. It doesn't, represent their experience. I mean, down to the actress that, was star being light skinned, down to some of those changes that we've kind of discussed throughout our review. It's very apparent that the audience that these filmmakers had in mind were white audience members. And I think that that is because they want, the white population wants to feel okay
Hmm.
about what's going on in the world in regards to minority, brutality, police brutality, things like that. So that really opened my eyes when we reviewed this film because it made me kind of think what else out there is being portrayed for a white audience, and
Hmm.
that representation is just not there.
Right, because even though it addressed microaggressions from a person of color's perspective, it's it still kept it as not a huge systemic problem. In fact, the whole ending switches from the hate you give to the hate we give.
Yeah.
And Sophia, earlier you were talking about the title and the meaning of the hate you give.
Mm-hmm.
And to lose that is significant, to make it about blaming the Black community themselves. But, you know,
Yeah, because it does it back to what I was saying, it does take away from the idea of, yes, Black people are fighting for their right for equality, but if media portrays this idea of, oh, it was his fault because he lifted up the hairbrush, then as this keeps happening in real life, we're going to continue to see that blame being placed on the Black person, or the person who falls victim to police brutality, not the other way around. Like, hey, like her friend Haley says in the film, all cops matter. And if we continue to put out into media those things like that, it won't ever change. So I think, like we're saying, it does start a conversation, but it's not necessarily positive
yeah,
nor negative.
it kind of more of the status quo, um, because it equalized the situation of the victims of police brutality or quick to shoot. They
I
equalized
would
with the police.
I would say though it could be considered negative because what it's really doing is just blanketing that what's happening in society is okay. And
Right,
so it's basically saying, it's okay that we're taking these Black lives and we're basically saying that they're not amounted to the police lives or things like
Hmm.
that. And so, yes, I do think in one way or another, it is a very neutral thing where it doesn't kind of show a positive or negative.
Hmm.
But I think it starts it more as a negative basis because it's basically giving, the white population like that, oh, well, it's fine type
Yeah.
of attitude.
or there's nothing we can do, instead of like,
Yeah.
hey, why don't we address some of the changes that we could bring into our system legally to prevent and hold police to higher standards
Hmm.
than they're being
Right.
held to.
I think you guys both brought up some really great points just now. It
Yeah,
really, there really is so many systemic issues that, yes, we can recognize, but until there's solutions put into place, they won't change. So
right.
I think we land on a 2.5, 3.
Yep, I think 2.5 to
I
3.
agree.
Yeah, great. That we seem to come into agreement. So, but it's worth watching and talking about.
Worth watching and talking about for sure. I think it definitely got our minds churning and
It
made us
did.
check our privilege. So I think that's a very important thing.
Yay.
So yeah, thank you everyone for watching.
Thanks for working together.